I've been married for a decade now, and honestly, I've never been unfaithful to my wife. Sure, there were plenty of chances, but the urge just wasn't there. Why? Because frankly, I'd already been there, done that. Before we met, I'd lived the wild life. I'd been with 2 women at once, fooled around with prostitutes, and dabbled in all sorts of questionable encounters. I pushed the boundaries of what I could handle, both in terms of imagination and disgust. So by the time I hit 35, the thrill of experimenting had worn off completely. I met my wife when I landed a new job. She was running the show in the department next to mine, divorced with a kid and absolutely stunning, not to mention sharp and self-assured. We clicked in so many ways. After a whirlwind few months, we tied the knot. Life was bliss. We were like 2 peas in a pod. We even had another child and a house together. Other women didn't even register on my radar. But then, a few years in, my wife started acting off. You know how people say that women have the 6th sense when it comes to their men keeping secrets? So lying is pointless. Well, recently, out of the blue, I woke up with that very same gut feeling. I had no idea where it came from, but it hit me. My wife was cheating on me. At first, there weren't any glaring red flags, but I started noticing subtle changes in her behavior. Every gesture, every smile, the way she interacted with me. It was as if day by day I could see more clearly that something was off. I even questioned my sanity at one point, wondering if I was just overthinking things. I tried to push those negative thoughts aside, but deep down, a storm was brewing. The anxiety gnawed at me so much that it made me physically sick, like I was being eaten alive by my own suspicions. Then the signs became harder to ignore. It wasn't like she was glued to her phone or avoiding me when I called. No, but suddenly, she started paying an unusual amount of attention to her appearance. She seemed obsessed with how she looked. Out of nowhere, she went on a diet, signed up for the gym, and lost some weight. Before I knew it, her closet was filling up with new dresses and, curiously, several sets of fishnet lingerie. Her routine began to change too. She started staying late at work more often, attending every corporate event, and spending all her free time with a new circle of friends. She'd come home from these outings in a fantastic mood, but as soon as she stepped through the door, that happiness seemed to evaporate. It was as if she left her joy outside, and what was left for me was just a shadow of her real self. My wife started to criticize me and compare me to other men, holding them up as examples, something she never did before. She used to be content with who I was, but suddenly it seemed like nothing about me was good enough. Our evenings, once filled with warm, cozy family moments in the kitchen, became distant memories. She stopped asking me about my day and no longer shared anything about hers. I couldn't help but wonder, had we just grown tired of each other? I tried to rekindle the romance, thinking maybe we just needed a spark, but every effort I made seemed to annoy her more than anything. Whenever I tried to talk openly, she shut me down, refusing to have an honest heart-to-heart conversation. That's when I decided to test for loyalty. I knew the risks involved, but I needed answers. I had to find out if my wife was cheating and if it was time to consider a divorce. I wanted to do it quietly, without causing a scene. What if, by some chance, I was wrong? At that point, I still clung to a shred of hope. But why was it so important for me to catch her in the act? I guess I needed undeniable proof of her betrayal. Something that would leave no room for excuses. Because if even a tiny doubt remained, I knew I wouldn't be able to let her go. The first thing I did was install a spy app on her phone. I combed through the records, texts, calls, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. Just work-related messages and chats with her girlfriends. All right, I thought, maybe the car would tell a different story. So I bought a voice recorder with a long battery life and slipped it under her seat. Every night I'd retrieve it and listen to the recordings. This went on for 2 weeks. During that time, I discovered my wife has a surprisingly good singing voice, and to my surprise, she even knows German. She also has a habit of swearing like a sailor while driving, but beyond these quirks there was nothing incriminating. It seemed like I had hit a dead end. I began to think maybe it was all in my head. that perhaps I was the one being irrationally paranoid. For a while, I even convinced myself that I was lucky to have her, that my suspicions were baseless. Then came an impromptu barbecue outing. While everyone was relaxing, I noticed the grill needed more coals. I headed to the car to grab a bag, and as I got there, I saw my wife's car had a flat tire. I popped the trunk to get the lug wrench and the pump, but instead I found something that made my heart skip a beat. Another phone. One I had never seen before. In that moment, it felt like the ground beneath me vanished, and my heart started pounding like a drum. I grabbed the phone and frantically scrolled through WhatsApp. I wish I hadn't. The messages revealed that my wife had been seeing another man for months. I wish I hadn't, but I managed to keep it together. I didn't want to create a scene in front of our friends. Instead, I just sat there in silence, trying to piece my thoughts together. My head was spinning, filled with a storm of questions. Why? What did I do wrong? A wiser man might have shrugged it off, let her have her fun, and not bothered himself with it. After all, they say love fades over time, and the thrill of sex dulls with the same partner. Maybe there's even an upside, a content wife, and no more headaches. But that wasn't for me. I couldn't accept a wife like that. It felt like a knife had been plunged into my back, painful and utterly revolting. The person I trusted most had betrayed me. At that moment, I knew without a doubt that I would file for divorce. But before that, I was determined to make them feel the same pain they had inflicted on me. I made up my mind to take revenge on my wife and her lover. It didn't take long to figure out where the guy lived, and when he brought my wife to his place, I quickly pulled up next to his car, blocking the driver's door so he couldn't get out. The shock on their faces was priceless. They clearly hadn't expected to see me there. My wife tried to get out of the car, but I slammed the door shut before she could. She rolled down the window and started screaming. That was exactly the moment I was waiting for. I pulled out a can of pepper spray and unleashed a powerful stream right through the crack in the window. Chaos erupted inside the car. They both started coughing uncontrollably, panicking as they struggled to breathe and escape. I watched them, satisfied, and then calmly got back into my car and drove away. When I got home, I didn't waste any time. I threw open the closet, yanked out all her things, stuffed them into garbage bags, and dumped them outside the front door. I made sure to slam it shut, making as much noise as possible. For the next hour, I stormed around the house, cursing my wife and her lover with every step. Thankfully, the kids were with their grandmother, so they didn't have to witness their dad in a fit of rage. We got divorced, and the property was split right down the middle. I signed over my share of the apartment to the kids, who stayed with her. A year later, we communicate pretty amicably, even celebrating the kids' birthdays together. I've moved on and found a new wife. I focus on the present and do my best not to dwell on the past. Cheating Secrets podcasts like me.